writer of this story. What would I have done? I would have made the crocodile shoot AA shit. Is it that hard, Netflix? Jesus Christ, man. It's so easy to write this shit, right? It writes itself. The crocodile should have gone out there, right? And had some weird, sacks on his back, right? And these sacks should have shot down the helicopters. Am I the only one to be like, pew, 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 and the helicopter will explode and everything badass, right? You know what I mean? That's Resident Evil. Yeah. I'm on time for a Resident Evil Netflix TV show review. I love the games. I hate this stuff. Obviously, I'm bringing in new grounds here, right? But I really want to emphasize that I hate this show because it's a terrible youth show. And I really want to point out immediately. We're going to make different parts here, right? We're going to talk about the terrible lore, the youthness, the zero respect for the source, right? And so on. But I really want to say immediately that, I like Resident Evil and so on. But let's say I had to make, right, a youth, teenage angst drama, right? Couldn't it be better, right? But anyway, here I'm holding, the latest game, right, in limited edition. And for some reason, I really liked the latest game. Yeah, it really spoke to me. There was something I really, really loved in that game. But seriously, I always like these games, and, I wish... It's not like I want this to suck, you know what I mean? It is kind of fun to make fun of it, so to speak, but I do honestly wish we could get a good show, right? The thing I want to say before we do the actual review of the show is that I have played the games since the first game, right? And I really remember going to my friend's house, and he was playing the game, and I was watching him playing the game, right? It must be kind of weird, but in the back in the days, right, we did all the time. So, like, another friend would come over to my place and play FF9. He was literally there every minute I played FF9. I would never play FF9 if he wasn't there. Same thing with Resident Evil. So, this is kind of how we did it back in the days, right? And I really loved it, right? But I want to like the show, but it's an utter garbage, trash, fire show, right? And in the end of the video, I do want to address that, yeah, goddamn every Netflix adaptation is terrible, right? And I think I know why, generally speaking, but like the only one that's been good is basically, for some reason, Bastard was pretty, yeah, it was a big ass reason Bastard was good. And of course I have zero faith, right, in the One Piece one, because, it's done by the same people, long can be pop. And I really want to emphasize immediately, right, that this show, the biggest reason everyone hates it is because it's just a garbage show. And why is it garbage? It's garbage because it is 50% roughly or so teenage angst drama, and it's terrible teenage angst drama, right? And I really want to say that I actually like shows. I've seen the 100, right, like the 5% 100. I kind of like The Flash. I like Lightning out actually. Arrow, I love, of course, Smallville, right? I love Supernatural and so on. So I like, these teenage kind of youth drama, coming of age shows, so on, right? Or mostly the CV Network. I don't mind those shows. I've seen a lot of them I really like, right? But this show is just so badly written in every possible way when it comes to this youth drama, and that is a big issue. Because at the end of the day, right, it's just like, if we ignore this base versus evil, we ignore the law shitting and so on, right, and say, okay, we're gonna make a TV show, right? This is a terrible TV. Episode 1 is probably the worst episode, honestly. Like, at least it gets better, seriously speaking. At least it gets better. Episode 1 is just completely shit, and at least it gets better after the first episode. But I mean, it's like from a 0 out of 10 to a 1 out of 10, you know what I mean? Yeah, episode 1 is such an incredibly low bar that getting better than episode 1 is not that complicated. But I still think it's worth to point out, right, that about 50% of the shows I mentioned is a youth drama show, and it honestly could be the worst youth drama show I've ever seen. Definitely in absolute bottom. And I think that, at the end of the day, that's a big issue, right? Because you can always argue saying that, no, but this is a plot hole or whatever. But if you ignore all that shit, right? If you ignore that, half the show is a JA, whatever it's called, youth drama, a young adult, and so on. And it's just like, this is terrible. Yeah, it's terrible for what it is, right? So, for example, then, to get more details here, my first hate of this thing is that, why do they hate their father for? It doesn't make any sense. Like, it's just a very, again, badly written youth teenage angst thing, because it's just generic. Like, it's never explained, honestly. Of course, it'll be spoilers nowadays, whatever, spoilers, right? Later on in the show, they're gonna learn that he needs their blood, right, to, like, sustain himself, because he's a clone. So, then they can hate him, right? Then he can be like, Dad, you don't love us, we use your clones or whatever, we hate you, Dad. That makes sense, right? But in the first, like, 5 episode, I don't understand why they hate their father for. Because Papa Wesker is actually a pretty good father, He's actually a pretty reasonable father in this world. And they just are so mean to him. Especially episode 1. They're so terrible to their father. And again, it doesn't make any sense. Like, we don't understand why. There is no flashback, right, of him being a bad parent, There's nothing like he forced us to move, and I had all my friends in the first place, whatever. No, instead, the daughter is like, I am so bullied at school A, right? He's moving me to school B, because they're moving and speaking, right? And she's like, I'm probably gonna get bullied again at B as well. Like, why is she angry that he's moving them from A to B when she hated living at A2? You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand what they hate the father for. It's never explained. It's just basically used very, very like, well, it's, again, an angst teenage show, right? So they have to hate their parents because that's how they are. Every teenager hates their parents. It's just like that, right? So episode 1 is probably, it says as a episode 1 is the worst episode. And it's bad paced, everything is terrible in it. But especially this is extremely generic behavior of the daughters, right? And this is the whole show is like this. It's just terrible. Like this scene here, it is a little cool when he kind of like, yeah, the only good scene in episode 1 is of course when Wesker is like, oh, I am the Wesker, I am the only person that can do this, my job. You're a useless engineer, no one cares about you, right? But basically the other 45-minute episode is completely garbage. And even this scene is still garbage because it has some other issues in it. But it's just like, it's so weird, you know, immediately, right? I feel that this show, I think it's, yeah, speaking, but Netflix, they kind of know this is a Bing show, right? Because no one would probably ever watch episode 2 if it was released, you know, next week, episode 2. I don't think anyone will come back and be like, yeah, I need to watch episode 2 of this thing, right? But now we immediately can watch episode 2, it definitely has a saving grace because I don't think anyone ever would be like, oh, I'm tuning in for this continuation. But honestly, it don't only get better, I would say, in episode 1. It actually gets better, yeah. But it's like 0 out of 10 to 1 out of 10, right? But it gets better, because episode 1 is by far the worst. And it's just so boring. But you know, the reason episode 1 is so bad, is so an aspect, right? Is all these cringe lines too, right? Like, first of all, I don't understand why they're not afraid of zombies or whatever, because apparently everything has been ignored or whatever. Everything has been, like, you know, hidden away from them. That doesn't make much sense given the lore, so I'll come to that more later. But still, I just want to address it immediately that this show would have made a lot better effort if it had some kind of expositioning in the beginning of it, right? That actually explains the situation to some extent of this new raccoon, right? But they just don't, so it's weird. And instead we get this scene where she's like, oh, you're a vegan, I hate you. And it's just so, everything is so badly written, how, you know, like, here comes the new girl, and immediately another girl is like, oh, you're a vegan? I'm gonna kill you, you know? It's just like, who would have done that? You know what I mean? They live in this, like, you have to take into context, right? Because they're living in this, like, city, the Umbrella City, right? Owned by Umbrella. New raccoon, but it's owned by Umbrella. Everyone in the whole city works for this company, right? And they're all, like, super evil corporation and everything. And if you were a kid, even if you're like 15, 16, you kind of are weird, you know what I mean? As I said, later on we see the daughter being like, tell them to apologize or else I get fired, right? Honestly, right, the daughter will probably known that, you know what I mean? That this is, again, a very, very, like, isolated society with basically, like, royalty, right? Like, their daughters, Wesker's the king of the city, you know what I mean? Everyone would have known that. It doesn't make any sense that she's immediately goes up and is like, I'm gonna freaking kill you, you know, into this new girl, where she extremely likely would know is basically the princess. Like, it doesn't make any sense that she wouldn't know that, seriously. Stuff like that is just weird, right? It's very cringy how they take the most, you know, generic youth scenes, right? And also that the show kind of basically goes on a speed run too, right? Like, they have all this, like, oh, calling you fat and this thing and so on. So it's really, really obnoxious, yeah. Everything is so, like, tropey. Look at her face, man, yeah. No, but serious, this one is so bad. But it's like how you ever start. Like she's been there for like 2 minutes, and this girl is like, I'm gonna kill you, vegan. Like, that's kind of the dialogue, right? It's just so unrealistic. And I think that the whole show, writing is insane and terrible. I'll come into that more later in detail, but it's just like, almost every scene in this show just happens because it happens. And it never really, it's managed to be incredibly slow-paced, but also sometimes being weirdly fast-paced, how everything is goes like that. Like, every scene is just smacks into it, right? And almost every scene that I mentioned is generic. It's like, bam, 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 here's all the generic bullet scenes in 5 minutes, you know what I mean? Like, bam, right? And it just feels so appallingly bad, right? And it's seriously probably the worst youth show I've seen. And I made an example, right? Here behind me is Bunny Senpai, right? One of the best animes I think ever. And Bunny Senpai is mostly an anime about this banter, you know? A girl and a boy, teenagers, they're in love, and there's bantering, right? But the banter is well written. This show has a lot of banter. But the banter is like, oh yeah, but that girl got a fake ass titties. Oh yeah, your boobs are way bigger. Like, you know, but it's written by, I don't know, like 45-year-old men that never talked to a girl, you know. It feels so weird, it's just so blunt, awkward, you know. It's like, I have a hard time imagining two, like, 14-year-old sisters saying that, well, they see that they walk by the gym and it's really cringy, where she's like, oh, look at that woman, her ass is fake, her boobs are fake, your ass is way bigger, your lips are way better, or whatever. Yeah, it's weird cringe, right? To keep complimenting their bodies. It's very, very, like, you know, it's so shallow, right? So shallow. It feels like the writer just can't do anything right, honestly, because dialogue. It's just so awkward. It's just so awkward, man. Point 2 then. The swapping thing is just terrible. So if you haven't seen the show, what the show does a lot is that it keeps going back and forth between, well, not present time, but like future and more future, I guess, right? So we have the main story is when they're teenagers, and then also jumps to when they're adults, right? So, and they're teenagers in the future, right? So it's like future and even further future, kind of what has fallen down, right? And the show has like a very weird thing when it jumps back between these things. And I think easily the show would have been so much better if it didn't have this whatsoever, right? Like, honestly, if the show was just 100% them as young adults, right? This angst, teenage drama, it would have been a better show. Yeah. I don't need to see this back and forth thing. Or vice versa, right? Having this show where they have these camps, it's more zombies, it's helicopters, right? It's more action, because the future is much more action-packed. And episode 4 is actually decent. They have this cool action scene, episode 4, cool stuff, zombies. It actually was like probably, honestly, a watchable scene. Like, yeah, episode 4 genuinely had like a 10-minute cool action scene that I actually enjoyed. Like, that's probably the only scene I enjoy in the whole show, probably. But, so, like, you know, because episode 4, and I guess also the drone scene later in episode 8, that kind of feels like the old movies, right? You know, the world is falling down, and now we just have, you know, people fighting little zombies, right? There's some action. It's, of course, not anything special, but it's like watchable, right? Because it's action, you know what I mean? It's watchable. But make up your mind, right? This swapping thing is just really annoying because, to beginning, until you kind of know, and obviously spoilers here, in the beginning you don't actually know that it's her, right? You don't exactly know that it's her in the future, grown up. It's just very obvious, but you don't really care. You know what I mean? You don't really care because they're so incredibly dislikable in the teenage angst, right? Like, why do they hate the father for, right? And the father being so meek and so on. So they're very dislikable. Everyone's likable. And now we have this future thing, and her personality is basically non-existing in the future, honestly. Her personality is just like, I need to get to a point. Yeah, I need to get to the MacGuffin, right? She has like no personality in the future. Future just scenes after just action. Yeah, this is no storyline really. So you don't really care about it. So instead it's just the future scenes, they're just kind of inserted into the plot where you're like, but can't you just finish this angst thing? Like, honestly, right? You have this teenage angst scene with like maybe the evil mom, right? Or the father, or the clone uncle, or whatever. Like, finish that scene, you know. Finish that scene. Don't skip over and show me like 10 minutes of action in the future, then go back again. It feels like they did this thing because the teenage version has so little action. So I guess they felt the need to throw in like 5 minutes there, the bullet there. But it just feels very disjointed, right? But the result is just very disjointed. It usually doesn't really feel like it's fitting. I will say this again. The show, again, actually gets better later on, right? Because, as I mentioned, episode 4, one actual good action scene. And then we have the boat scene, which is terrible. But at least in the boat scene, you kind of have that, okay, I'm following, you know, the main character as an adult, right? So it feels like it makes more sense. So when we have arrived at the boat, right, at least at this point, we kind of know what is happening. We have gone like enough of length of the teenage angst shit combined with the completely pointless action stuff in the future, and now the stories are at least somehow, you know, connect to each other, right? Because the first 4 episodes action pack in the future has like zero relevance to what happened in the past, like completely pointless. So it feels like at least here, there's like, I'm trying to cure this thing with my father did, so it has some kind of like, you know, connection, right? So it's less disjointed, and the scene from like A to B time traveling thing, you know, feels a little more like, okay, this thing happening, then that happened, and this happened. It feels a little more relevant, right? So it does actually feel better, I guess, but it still is really terrible. And And honestly, like, obviously, I would never have finished the show if I wasn't doing all things at the same time. Like, I was exercising, watching on the same time, right? Playing some games on the same time. I would never push myself through it, right? I wanted to review it, right? I wanted to review it. I love the games, and there's no way I would have watched through it if I was like a random TV show, because it actually is the worst in the beginning, and also the ending is terrible, though. It probably is his best episode 4 or 6 or so, yeah. And I guess episode 7, actually, when the clones are out there, it actually is decent. So it is actually like the first 3 episodes are probably the worst, and episode 8 is really bad, and it's kind of like, yeah. But anyway, the boats kind of, I would say, symbolizes when the disjointment feels better, but it still is absolute shit, right? And I just want to, I know I'm repetitive, but I just want to point out the last point again that I think it would be better if it was just one show, right? One timeline, it would have been better. Next point. Constant contrivities and ass pulls, or whatever you call it. So something that really bothered me, and why the future thing is really bad, and I want to say it again, right? I'll talk about the lore later, because I want to end the video talking about lore and respect, or lack of respect, so right? But it's just like, I'm not thinking that makes the show just a bad show, right? That's why I'm beating up it. I'm talking about what makes the show bad, and then talking about the actual games or what. So what makes the show bad too is that instead of her being a Mary Sue, I guess, that's very common in this kind of, Netflix Vogue stuff, whatever, right? She's just really useless. Yeah. Like, the main character is completely shit. Like, honestly, she's completely terrible. And I don't mean as a writing or as a personality, even though she is absolutely dislikable. But I mean from an actual competence standpoint. In the future, she's completely just carried by everyone else. And they actually got to a point where I just almost laughed at it. I laughed a few times because basically every time something happens in the future, the main character does like nothing, right? So first, she fails with her zombie repellent thing, get an injury next to them, and she has to escape from that, right? Then she's saved by the random people. They want to give it to Umbrella for some reason, right? Because they want Umbrella money or something. And then she's saved by the Umbrella, by the zombies and so on, right? And then the Umbrella captures her, and then she's saved by these random, cultists in France. And then they're stuck in the France cultists, and the Umbrella guy saves her. And it's like that all the time. Like, she never does anything. Like, trust me. Like, she's absolutely garbage. Like, seriously, right? And I mean garbage from, a competent standpoint, right? And she just moved along the plot line, right, And then she fails at the boat, right? She brings a zombie into the boat, and then the zombie kills her best friend, or whatever. And again, she used to kill the zombie, right? Some random guard kills the zombie, right? You know what I mean? Like, she fails at literally, every step in the way, except when she meets her sister and, throws the gas thing, the gas zombies come there. But basically, up to episode 8, seriously, episode 1 to 7, the main character loses every fight. You know what I mean? She's like ass catchable worse, right? And that is just, again, dislikable, right? And I was thinking about it's kind of funny because usually we get this Mary Sue, super Ray or whatever, right? Captain Marvel, so on. And for that matter, I love Captain Marvel's comics back in the days, right? And but that's what I'm talking about. I want to address it right now, but even point, right? Captain Marvel movie, right? That's an example of, a woman that's just way too powerful, right? She's boring because she's too perfect, right? In the old comics, she was like a holic and this stuff. That was better because she was a very powerful woman, very strong female character, but she had her vulnerabilities, right? You know what I mean? So the Mary Sue issue, right, that we have in a lot of modern stuff, is that the woman is just too strong, right? They're too strong, too good at everything, right? Yeah. But in this show instead, honestly, I would have preferred that freaking Captain Marvel Mary Sue, Honestly, because this woman instead, she's just useless. Ever has to save her. In every goddamn scene, she needs to be saved by someone else, right? And I'm just like, hold on, I'm actually literally missing the Mary Sue female character. I mean, I genuinely mean it because I keep saying it, but yeah, because it is honestly better having a female character that wins everything than having it that loses everything. But loses everything is just boring, you know what I mean? Because in the end of the day, right, it means that in the storyline, she just never does anything. The storyline just moves her, she's just moved by the plot, right? She has no input on what happens, right? She's saved every time, or something random happens, right? She's suddenly in this country, whatever, yeah. And that means she can just continue the plot, right? So she becomes a plot object instead of a character, right? Because a plot object is basically a camera that we can just follow in the general world, as she has zero input on what happens around her, right? Until she gets to the boat, I guess. But onto the boat, she has absolutely no input, everyone has to save all the time. And on the boat, she kills her best friend immediately. So it's like, yeah, she really is insanely incompetent, right? So that's the main character, right? And all the future plot lines, all like that, right? Yeah, she's completely shit all the time. In the past, then, it was similar in the past. They're very, very incompetent. It feels absurd how these two random teenage girls can like sneak into the super Umbrella facility. So now I'm talking about general here, but of course it feels very weird how Umbrella has no security. Last episode, the same thing, right? There's no security, it doesn't make much sense. They just managed to defeat them. Uncle Wesker, like Clone Wesker, beat up anyone, the other guy. There's a lot of weird scenes for people's like competence or just whatever the story was to be at the moment, right? And I once didn't like do a power scaling, but it clearly feels that everyone's powers, including zombie Wesker, daughter, whatever, all this stuff, is very random, right? And one scene they're very powerful, and the next scene they're completely useless, right? Yeah. So it always is no consistency, right? The power level is whatever the current scene needs to be, right? Which is terrible from a writing standpoint, because it never makes any sense. But generally speaking, this kind of like, especially as I mentioned in the future part, where they kind of force into the next plot line, it's always kind of like that. So one scene in particular, I think the example of it, is when the daughter, so I'm talking about the future daughter, right? So the grandkid of Wesker, she meets crocodile, and this crocodile doesn't eat her, right? It's a lot of that, yeah. When the characters survive because they have to survive, they are seen when her mom then runs before the scene. She runs past like 50 zombies with like a garbage lock, and they just don't eat her because reasons, right? When the zombies attack the camp, they don't attack the boat people. They only attack the umbrella people for some reason. It's a lot of that shit, right? Where it's like, oh, the zombies are very selective. They only eat evil people, right? It's a lot of shit all the time, yeah. Like, no one's ever competent. Just like whatever the story wants to be happens, right? Yeah. For example, in the last scene, though, after the crocodile doesn't eat her daughter, which, again, you can guess there's some DNA stuff, like her aunt says. So maybe it makes sense, but it's never explained. But sure. But after that scene, I think the perfect scene of how this always happens in every episode is that, okay, so the crocodile doesn't do shit, right? Then it's shot down by the helicopter. Then she goes running and says, oh, my daughter, and hugs her, right? And you can say that, okay, fine, the daughter said she's immune to the zombies because of her mom or whatever. Okay, fine, right? However, in the very next second after they hug each other, her sister appears again, the evil sister, right? The Billy and whatever. Yeah, she appears, and it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, it makes sense she would land, with helicopter, right? She shoots crocodile, she will land, and she will run over there, right? But everything in the story is very weirdly paced in the sense, how it's like, we're hugging, and the very next second, she's already there. How did she land the helicopter in, a second, right? It's taking a minute. And how did she get next to them? Because the helicopter was kind of far away in the distance and sat next to them. And this might sound like nitpicky, but this happens every time. Like in every episode, things just happen because they have to happen. You know what I mean? It's the same. It's like it feels very contrived, right? You know what I mean? Like, oh, we have to save Dad. Bam! Suddenly this guy opens the door and this happens. It's like that all the time. The whole show has this incredibly contrived, like, plot armor moments, right? Oh, we need to get a hacker. Here comes my boyfriend's a hacker, We need to learn about the nuke in Raccoon City. Here comes this random, I don't know who he was, journalist, detective guy. He just happens to find us at this, like, frat party because he saw me on Instagram or something. You know what I mean? The plot just happened. All that was so stupid. So basically, one person, right, that had no input on the storyline really, but it's seen for the beginning, is this detective guy, whatever he is, that, figured out that they nuked Raccoon City, right, and the zombies. And he wants to talk to her about having the affection, right? And for some reason, he gets to Umbrella, the whole place, so on, which doesn't make any sense because it's like a locked city or whatever, right? But he does that for no other planet, doesn't make any sense. And then the Umbrella Corporation to find him, they fail doing that for some reason, even though they have cameras everywhere, they fail doing that. And he somehow then finds the girls at this, teenage party, right? Which is really a bad episode. Yeah, but they find the party. And it's like, how did he do it? He was like, oh, I saw your image on Instagram or TikTok or something. I don't know, but even if he saw them, a TikTok of them, how would he know where the factory is, the party is? Like, he doesn't know that. He just arrived in this city, I mean? He just magically finds them, like, immediately. And then when he finds them, because the writing is so terrible, he just enters the party, it's like, oh, are they here, Billy? He screams their name like an idiot. And you're like, you just flew half the planet, you infiltrated this umbrella lockdown city, whatever it is, like this corporate city, right? And you managed to find this girl, tracking them on social media and finding this place and everything. So he's a kind of genius stalker, right? But then when he gets this, like, baby, and he gets to scream like an idiot. It doesn't make any sense. It's really contrived, and then it breaks character immediately, right? That's like the whole TV show. So yeah, all this stuff is happening because they have to happen all the time, right? And it never flows in a organic way. Yeah, nothing ever flows organic, right? Because it's like, so this scene here, if you haven't seen the show, this is yet again the main character being saved by random people. They happen to save. It's like the 4th time she is saved by random people in like 2 episodes or 3 episodes. Yeah, it just happens all the time, and it's just so silly. So let's talk about woke cringe, right? And I want to say immediately, I don't really care that Wesker is black. I really don't care about that. That's not why I call it woke. No, the woke cringe is this kind of stuff, and this also makes the show worse. Because it just makes the character dislikable. So what I mean here is that the very first scene, basically, right, where we're introduced to the new annoying daughter of Wesker, one of them immediately is like, we're the only black people in the city. This city is terrible, Immediately she plays like, I need black friends or whatever. And you're just like, is that the first way you want to use a new character? You have to introduce her by talking about race? Really? Like, can't you at least let it go like 1 episode? I mean, if it's gonna be more organic, right? Let her go to school, right? Let her meet her classmates, and let have the classmates being mostly white people, right? Then she can say that, like, we're the only black family here. They obviously they like us, they hate us because we're black, whatever. Then she can say that, right? Now she moves into a new city, and immediately it's like, oh, I'm the only black person here. And it's not even true. It isn't even true because, let's be honest here, right? The show is, of course, woke, right? So most characters in the show are like, people of color, whatever. I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm just saying that because her line doesn't make any sense. Because you're like, but it feels like every person except Evelyn is like she's white, yeah. She's white, her wife is white, and her son is white, And the rest of the main catalysts are like non-white. And that's not bad, but I'm just saying that her line doesn't make any sense, right? She's like complaining that, why am I the only black woman here? You're like, but you aren't. It's like, your sister is, I guess she's like Hawaiian or something. She's like Asian, what is she, like half Asian, half black maybe? Because her father is Wesker, he's black, and then her mom, I guess, is Asian or something. Something like that, yeah. So she's like half black or something, but whatever, you get my point. Like, it's just pushed it in, right? And then it just keeps going, right, with these really weird lines all the time. Like this scene here. So she controls Evelyn to do this like cringe dance thing, and that I think really makes it more cringe than woke. But it clearly is a combination of cringe and wokeness. So the Zootopia line, people are memeing it, that is true. That she's like, oh, I only look at Zootopia, stuff like that. Yeah, it's really weird line. And the umbrella guy, I can't remember his name, but the dog guy, he likes SpongeBob and so on, right? There's all of this really weird, cringy lines, like references to our time, and a lot of talk about, like I mentioned earlier, the girls talk about, fake boobs and ass and so on, and talk about, adult stuff and porn and hentai and so on. Yeah, it's a lot of these weird lines, right? And I have to say that I feel it coming from a woke standpoint. Like, just be honest here, right? It feels very woke because it's like, yeah, let's make the character joke about, I don't know, yaoi hentai something, Let's throw in like 10 yaoi hentai lines. That's fun, right? I mean, I like yaoi, don't get me wrong. It's like the best genre ever. No, I mean, I like yaoi, don't get me wrong. But I just feel like, doesn't that come off as kind of woke? You're like, yeah, let's joke about this stuff, something. It feels weird, It feels weird. It just feels unnatural. And also very unnatural because this is in the future. And yes, some of the media has been destroyed. But yet it feels like every character is obsessed with, like, I don't know, furry hentai from 2012 or something. Yeah, it feels really weird. Like, it's not even modern today, you know. They're like, oh, I like to watch Widowmaker Overwatch hentai every night. You're like, well, that's not even popular even. This isn't popular now. That's popular like 5 years ago, you know. It feels weird. It feels dated. It's so strange too, because it's a Zootopia line. That's dated today, you know. I mean, I'm sure people also produce some super stuff. But you hope I get the point, right? That kind of like furry stuff was popular when that movie was out, right? You know, I actually worked on that game for that matter. I worked on a stupid game, but yeah, that was popular. So I worked on that in 15. Yeah, 15. I worked on that on a Zootopia video game thing. So I mean, that's 7 years ago, guys. Like, you know what I mean? It's outdated today, right? So they're making like 5 years ago old, like, yeah, hentai jokes, basically. I mean, I like hentai jokes, but you get my point. It feels weird that it's like 2035. Let's do some weird cringe dance and talk about, you know, 30 years ago porn or something. Yeah, it's just very strange. It's a lot of that stuff, and of course the main evil woman has a wife or whatever. And again, I mean, of course she can be evil and be a lesbian. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying that, yeah, every character is like woke something, right? Everyone's either, yeah, it just feels weird with all these weird lines, right? And that's an issue, right? Like I said, but let's say we didn't have that weird line about, oh, I'm the only black woman here, even though she's a black, and so on. Yeah, like I said, we didn't have lines. We didn't have the weird Zootopia and the hentai lines, whatever, yeah. You didn't have that shit, right? You remove all that stuff, thank you. And then you have Evelyn, the evil CEO, being lesbian, right? Then it would be a good, I mean, the show wouldn't be good still, but I mean, that part would be good, right? Because I mean, I like Yuri, you know? I like Recon, very good show, yeah. I love Yuri, right? I love Yuri, so yeah, so I have no problem having an evil lesbian in the show, right? You know what I mean? But it's just that, it's just everything has to be that constantly, right? It has to be constantly talking about, and of course that guy, their son, has to be like, oh, I know lady, I got 2 moms. He has to mention it, you know, there has to be this cringe thing. And that's why it feels cringe too, because we as the viewer, we already know he has 2 moms, right? We already learned he has 2 moms, yet let's talk about it a few times, right? So it feels like it's a cake on cake too, right? They really have to hammer down that she's a lesbian, you know? It has to be said like 10 times. And that makes it cringe again, right? Because keep like, understand, you know, right? And that's the issue. And I always feel this thing that when I watch this stuff, right? I wish we could just be like, here's a lesbian bad girl, right? And that's just who she is, you know what I mean? Don't talk about it. Just have her, you know, kiss her wife, or I don't know, have a sex scene, her, you know, effing her wife, whatever. Yeah, have that, whatever. I don't care. Like, do that, but don't talk about it 10 times, right? You know what I mean? And it's not because I don't like that. I just feel like that's a better character, where the character is an evil CEO and she happens to be gay, right? You know what I mean? And that can be mentioned like a few times, or preferably shown, right? Or her kissing her wife or so on, right? Don't even mention it. Just have her kiss her wife and then move along, you know what I mean? Then we know she's a lesbian, right? And then you can say, okay, that's her wife, whatever, yeah. And then, of course, she can say it once that he has lesbian moms, whatever. But you get a point. But keep hammering it down in our throat, right? That's why it feels so woke. And then, of course, again, combining it with this really weird Zootopia jokes, so on. That's so cringy, man. Okay, so now we'll talk about the actual like writing and pacing and so on. So the writing and pacing is terrible, right? If you can skip half the episodes, it's just insanely how bad it is. So, for example, the boat episode 5, I guess primarily, it is a very weird episode where she gets to the boat. It slows down the future thing extremely, right? As I mentioned earlier, the future is very action-packed, and then she gets to the boat, and it's like, I'm a single mom, even though I'm married, and then I need to talk to my mom or daughter or something, and I need to, like, argue with my best friend that I later murdered, but we talk to her for, like nothing happens. Like, nothing really happens, right? And because it's a generic TV show, you know that a zombie will eventually get on board the ship, right, and kill them, you know, because it's a zombie show, right? So you sit there waiting for her to, like, you know, get the zombie or the zombie to climb up or something, yeah. And I felt like you could easily skip the whole boat part until the zombie gets brought aboard by her, right? Nothing else before it really matters. It's really badly written, very slow-paced stuff, right? And this is kind of the whole show. Like, most scenes feel that they can easily be cut away from like 30 or 20 minutes per episode, could easily be removed. And it'll be the exact same storyline. That's just a terrible writing. And I think that one thing that I've been thinking before watching the show is that it feels like it really is living on being a binge show, right? Like, if it never, no one ever watched more than one episode, it wasn't really available, episode 2. But even though there's that, but you feel like so little happens in some episodes that you really feel like there's no way this show would ever work, right? If we didn't have next episode immediately. Episode 1, of course, being the most obvious one, but even episode 2, 3, 5, 6, even 7, even 8 support, yeah. It's just badly written, and it's just bad. Like, it's not hard to explain it, but it's just like, I'm sitting there being like, why is nothing happening for it? And I really feel like there's no way I would even like mentally get through this show if I wasn't doing stuff on the same time, right? Like, I was sitting here, I have several screens, right? I was watching the show here, I was watching my friend play Elden Ring on the other screen, and I am myself playing Tales of Arise on the third screen, right? So I'm watching him play one game, I'm playing one game, and I'm watching the show on the third screen, and that's like, otherwise I would like die, right? Because it's so boring. Like, nothing happens. So here's this piano scene I have here. This is the best episode in the sense of now it actually feels like Resident Evil. They have to play like a music in the writing, open a note and so on. So this is one of the episodes where I feel like someone actually cared a bit about the game, right? But yet it's really slow paced. It's like, this part is good, then they're climbing under the cameras, and it just takes it takes like the whole episode, right? It takes almost the whole episode doing this thing. It takes so long time. So even though I like this piano scene in a sense, right, I take it up here because, yeah, the pacing, again, is atrocious, right? Everything happens in the slowest possible way. And however, as I mentioned earlier, though, the show is so terrible, right, because it combines really, really slow pacing. But as my previous point, right, it also combines this contrived, like, quick events where, again, helicopter immediately next to her. When she leaves the cave in France, she just happens to be next to the boat. And I'm just like, wait, was the boat in, like, what, Normandy or something in France? Something like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, she just leaves the cave, and the very next second, she's at the boat. Like, did she run there? It has to be, like, a month between. It has to be 1 day at least. If it's actually basically teleported to the boat. It reminds me of another really kind of terrible adaptation, Karakuri Circus, which is a cool manga, but the anime has some big issues with the catalog content. That anime did the same thing where they're in China in one episode, and they're like, we need to go to the Sahara Desert. You're like, okay, next episode, they're in the Sahara Desert. And there's nothing in between, you know what I mean? It is in the desert, yeah. He's like, let's go over there. Next frame, like, we're there. Yeah, you're like, how did this happen? Right? And then they're flying back to Japan, and he just lands in Japan. He just crashes in Japan next to his best friend. His wife is weird. Like, but that show, for example, they removed like half the manga, right? They had an anime, 30 episodes, and they cut away basically like half the manga chapters. They removed like several volumes in the middle of the story, so completely, right? So it doesn't make any sense. But of course, the reason why from one episode to another it can just jump a country over there is because they actually cut away the travel and the fights and everything to get to that country, right? To cut away everything in between, right? But obviously it makes the show is very disjointed. And this show feels, again, very similar, where you're like, but she wasn't she on the country last second? Like, how'd she get there? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you don't understand because they're shaped by zombies. And maybe it wouldn't have mattered so much in another kind of story. But in this story, in the future part, right, in a zombie apocalypse, it feels very strange how the main character, that also so far as I mentioned, has been incredibly incompetent, is suddenly used in another country or whatever, right? Like, how does she get there? How does she pass through this horde of zombies, right? While also being chased by Umbrella and also having, like, no weaponry or no bullets or whatever. And she's just there, you know what I mean? It's just like, okay. So, yeah, the pacing is so bad, right? Because it either goes incredibly slow or it goes incredibly fast. And it's interesting how it managed to kind of like, you know, you just dwell on this kind of scene for 10 minutes, and then it removes the scene in between where you're like, I actually would like to have some, especially here. And of course, the last episode is terrible. It doesn't really explain much of the world still, right? It doesn't explain what happened really. It doesn't really like end explanation of how the world crashed or whatever, basically. So it's so bad. It's so bad pace. Let's talk about the characters. So first of all, who wants, you know, Wesley Sniper Wesker or Suburban Wesker, right? Yeah, you're like, I think everyone wanted Evil Wesker and not the cheesy dad Wesker. But anyway, my biggest qualm with the characters are a couple of things, right? I already talked about how dislikable the main girls are. So I'll talk a little more about the dad and Evelyn and so on now here and so on. But first of all, right, why is Wesker so good? You know, this is bad. Like, he's raised by evil, you know, psychopath Wesker, right? Like, why did he raise his clone sons to be good guys? I guess arguably they just hated their father. He locked them in, so they're like, I guess, good or something. But he's kind of, again, contrived. Like, he's counter opposite because what, he was mean to them, but wouldn't he raise them to be evil? You know what I mean? Wouldn't he raise them to be evil? He's evil. He's really evil. Wouldn't he raise them to be like him, right? Like, they seem to be pretty easy to manipulate them. You know, they have superpowers. They're superhumans. Wouldn't they kind of be like him and so on? Yeah, speaking. And also, I mean, they have, like I said, they are exactly his genetics. So they would have, you know, his similar personality trait and so on like he has, right? They would have the same percentage. And they also would have the same powers. You know, basically the virus that also affects your brain and so on. So they would be much more similar to him. Yet none of them are like him at all. So that's just terrible from any standpoint, right? But I'm really bothered by the son. I'm really bothered by Evelyn's son. So Evelyn is a super evil CEO, Evelyn Marcus, you know, and is she supposed to be Evelyn from Resident Evil 7 and 8? You know, like the manor Evelyn, the old lady. That's also the lore after the thing. But anyway, she's super evil. Yet her son is a goody two-shoe. Why? Why is her son good for? I genuinely mean it, right? Like, for example, I mentioned earlier, I like Smallville, right? I like this, some of these huge shows, right? Smallville, Lex Luthor, of course, classic evil bad guy, right? He's raised by, of course, Lionel Luthor. So Lex Luthor played by Michael Rosenbaum, right? Rosenbaum, hard to say. He's a very, very, you know, he's still my favorite Lex Luthor, seriously, right? And his father, then Lionel, you know, raises him to be a bad guy, right? Yeah, he's raised to be a bad boy, right, to speak, or more so a pragmatic evil CEO. But you get my point. He's raised to be like, we are smart, how to make money, right? Don't care about this stuff, so yeah. And so Evelyn is super evil, right? She's like, oh, I don't care. People might die by our medicine, but who cares, right? I want to make evil money and so on, right? She's incredibly super evil, incredibly psychopathic. Yet her son is like the goodest guy ever, right? And that doesn't make any sense because, again, right, her son should probably be like Lex Luthor, right, you know? Like, he basically has Lionel Luthor as his mom, right? And Lionel Luthor, like I said, Smallville, would raise his son to be, maybe not evil, but, you know, like business, capitalistic, or whatever, right? Because you just imagine that, right? Imagine that, I'm talking about this show, but it's so bad because, I mean, again, his mom is like the most evil person on the planet, right? Yet she hasn't like instilled anything of her spectrum or whatever, of her personality or her beliefs in her son or in her wife. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. From a very simple standpoint, right? She's an extreme capitalist, right? Everything is about profit, right, for her. Why hasn't she raised her son to believe in the same system, right? And of course, I understand people say that just because you're raised by an evil capitalist, you can still be a communist or whatever. Of course you can. But that has to be in the character's arc, right? But if his mom is gonna be the world's greatest capitalist, and I say great as in super absurd capitalist, right? Greedy as F, right? She kills him later, right? Because she's such a capitalist. Yeah. If that's his mom, right, he would either be raised by her and be like, oh yeah, mom is right, let's kill them all, money, you know. Or he'll be like, I hate my mother, she's a goddamn capitalist, she's drugged my other mom, right, and I want to kill my mom, or I want to betray my mom because she's a terrible person, right. Either he has to have a characterization that he hates what his parent is doing, or he has to have a characterization where he believes in his parent's vision, right. Now he's like this very nice, cool kid that is super friendly to everyone, even though he's raised by, you know, like the planet's worst person, right? You know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense. It's just terrible. In the same way as Wesker is raised by evil, like clone Wesker's father is still his super evil Wesker, yet he's also a very good, very nice person and tries to fight Evelyn on making evil righteous one, right? Like, why is he so good for? Because maybe because he was raised in a lab. But still, you know, it's like, why? Right? And he also should really have a character arc, or at least a characterization where he explains how much he hates his father, right? if if Clone Wesker explained how much he hated his father's vision, and that he's a good person, at least it would make some sense, right? But no, that's not here, right? So the character writing is just appallingly bad. Not just the angsty main characters, but also everyone else around them. Their motivation and so on is just so piss poor, right? Evelyn is just evil because she's evil, right? And everyone else is just like there, right? They don't have any driving really. Like Wesker he just wants to be alive with his daughter, right? He doesn't have any real motivation to work at Umbrella. Like why is actually like honestly, why does Wesker even work at Umbrella for? I mean, yes, he's kind of kidnapped by her, I guess, but if you ignore that, right? Why does he want to work there for? Couldn't he just do the blood thing with them on the side and just work somewhere else? Or it's never even explained that he has to work. I guess you could argue that Evelyn forced him to be an employee there forever, I suppose. But it's kind of like, okay, yeah, I guess. But why does... It's like, why is that guy, and how did that guy's dad die? It's just all the time. Oh, why did I bother? It's just so bad. But yeah, every character lacks motivation. I mean, in the end, Evelyn's motivation is only to make money, right, She's an evil capitalist, yeah. She's just like, I'm really evil for some reason. Why does she kill her son for? That might have been cured. It didn't make any sense because, I mean, you already should kill him to like, haha, look at me, you can't control me. But at the same time, it was no real purpose because her plan was to kidnap the Wesker family, double the clone and clone daughter and enslave them anyway. She might have well done that and it would be good for her. Like, it didn't make any sense because it would be good for her to have Wesker cure her son, right? Because if he can cure her son being bitten by his daughter's super virus power, right? That might produce a cure for everyone. It was no point killing her son. Worst case scenario, he would be a good test subject, right? To get an actual cure for the virus. So it doesn't make any sense to kill him anyway. And it's typically really badly written scene where the author, or whatever, scriptwriter, whatever you call him, just wants you to see, haha, this woman is evil. Yeah, but it made no sense. She was kind of pragmatic earlier, because Evelyn has been pretending to be a good mom, right, to her son and to her wife and so on for the episodes, and she seemed to love her wife, his other mom, right? So by killing her son, how is she going to explain it to her wife later? That her son died? You know what I mean? I guess you're going to drag her wife more, but it's like, again, the point of killing her son doesn't make any sense. It's there to make her evil, right? But from a pragmatic capitalist standpoint, having her son be a test subject is much more beneficial for her. Perhaps he can be cured. That's better for her marriage, right? And for her being a mom, whatever. So that's better. And for a capitalist standpoint, right? Again, he's like he's the first person being bitten by this new virus that she might have, right? The daughter, right? Because she might have like a new mutation, right? So he's a very valuable test subject, I guess. But maybe she didn't want him to be in pain or something. But it's really motivated. So all together, right? And her character doesn't make any sense, right? Nothing makes any sense. It's all garbage. It's all goddamn garbage. And like every character is basically just completely shit, right? Or have no personality. Like her wife. Her wife just drags. She just has no personality. She's just happy, right? She's just on joy. Just what it is, right? But it's also a terrible scene as well, because like, why does she drag her wife for? Her wife was seemingly kinda happy, and I mean before the joy drag, and then she just drags her when she goes home from work because of reasons. Again, that's one of those like, we're just gonna make her look evil, and then the son is gonna be forced to hate his mom because she drags his other mom. But what's the point? Like, why did she drag her to begin with? You know what I mean? There was never any character arc or characterization in storyline that made her have to drag her wife. She only did it so her son would hate her, so he would be at the plot later, right? Like, constantly that shit, right? Yeah, it's just like they constantly break characterization or lack characterization, and it's interesting because the show is so slow paced. Yet I feel like I barely have any motivation for any character, except I guess the future daughters or something. But it's just so bad, right? And also for that matter, I said the last thing, characters. So she kills her best friend, which is an insanely terrible scene, right? Because she's back on this ship, and she's angry at her husband for being a bad dad. You're not a real father, and so on. Then she immediately takes in a zombie on the boat, which is probably the worst scene in the whole show. Because, she's all about, oh, I'm a mom, I love my daughter. Yet after being back home for like 10 minutes, she already has almost killed daughter. Like, yeah, it's just so terrible. She gets this grand speech on her husband being a shitty father, no one gets her, and the whole, oh, my dad didn't love me and so on, right? And immediately she's like endangering her own daughter. Immediately. The very next scene, after she ranted a bit about being the only good parent in the universe or whatever, right? She immediately is like, okay, I'm gonna experiment on this very dangerous zombie brain, and then I'm gonna take up a zombie and break all protocols, tie it up in my laboratory with really bad, shitty, whatever, rope something. And then when the daughter is like, Mommy, the daughter enters her laboratory and doesn't even ask the daughter to leave the room. She's like, oh, it's safe, because water makes them slower, so you can stand next to it. And it breaks free. I mean, it's like, she's the worst mom ever. Like, seriously. That scene is easily the worst thing I think in the whole show, right? How she's just like, here's a zombie. Just after, again, she talked so... I think seriously it's probably the worst scene in the whole show, right? Because I want to be repetitive, but seriously, she keeps talking about how no one is a good mom except her and so on, and then tries to kill her daughter basically immediately, right? And of course she kills her best friend afterwards. But one issue I have though with the whole show is just why do they like her, right? So she's like kind of a secret Mary Sue anyway, because it's like she just killed her best friend and almost killed her own daughter and almost everyone on the ship, right? She didn't fix it. She couldn't do shit right, so God fixed the zombie for her. And then here comes Umbrella. It's like, you need to give us this woman, right? Because we need her. And the captain's like, no, she's one of us. Why does he say that, right? She just killed one of his scientists. She just almost killed everyone on the ship, right? You know what I mean? That to me is so terrible too. Like, why is the captain and the rest of the ship protecting her for? She just almost killed them all. Like, they should all hate her. They should be like, take that bitch and get out of her. You know what I mean? That kind of shit doesn't make any sense either. She's very, very, again, generic. Like, they have to defend her against the evil corporation, even though she is, like, the worst person on the ship, right? They probably should have executed her by themselves. They probably, I mean, seriously? They probably, in this zombie apocalypse world, right? She probably would have been banned, After taking on the zombie, which she knew was against protocol, right? And almost killing everyone, they probably would either kill her or at least kick her out, right? You know what I mean? They would probably kick her out, right? Because she's a danger to them. She should have been banned from the boat anyway. So why are they spending time protecting her for? Like, why? They don't want her on the boat anyway. The guy just tried to shoot her, and then that guy is completely ignored, right? He should probably come back and betray the boat to get her in there. So it's just, all this is bad, man. It's just so bad. And just, for example, there is a crocodile. Why does her husband have the key for? There is no storyline that the husband is important on the ship. But he, of course, has the key with the captain because it's her husband, so he has the key. You know what I mean? That kind of bad writing is there, right? Where it's just like, well, of course, her husband was like the first mate or something, or vice captain or whatever, right? Because it's her husband. So that was never really exactly explained. But it is how it is, right? That's kind of the main points I want to make, everyone. Now I want to talk about some general lore issues, right? And I hope you guys like the video, right? Subscribe, slap it, and so on. But I really want to put out there that I wanted to make these other points and not focusing so much on actually it being Resident Evil, you know what I mean? And I hope I tried to make those points more like in general. Like, why does this thing suck, right? Why is that thing shit? Why is it the right thing bad for, right? And now I want to talk about more about the game, right? You know what I mean? Now I go in and say these things doesn't make sense and so on. A little bit, right? And generally, what I feel though is the main issue is, of course, the lack of respect, right, for the source material, right? So, as I mentioned earlier, right, we saw the Complete 2, that show was just garbage, right? But it's just things where they change stuff for no reason, right? And it's not about the vocals of like making Wesker black or whatever, right? But it's more about the stuff where it's like, but how did they censor that everyone got nuked, And the same thing with people. There's all this weird stuff where they add new characters or they alter how the character act or whatever, right? So I mentioned talking about the Wesker, right? Like, why is Wesker so different than his personality? He should be so on. So I tend to feel that these adaptations, right, they come back to that, which is a general issue where the lore doesn't make any sense, right? So I mentioned earlier, but I really feel this show would have been much easier to understand and better if episode 1 had exposition, right? Okay, what is happening here? Episode 1 should have explained to us, the viewer, that Raccoon City was never nuked, you know what I mean? Like, it was like a gas leak and so on. It should have explained the stuff to me. It should have explained the stuff that because no, I have played all the games. I played Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, 4, Code Veronica, whatever you call it, all these games. But I played those games. I played 7, 8, whatever, right? Yeah. You can review all the games, whatever. And as I mentioned, of course, obviously 8 has. But anyway, right? I played those games. So I'm coming in here, right, from a person that has played the games, knows the lore, knows the characters, and I'm just like, wasn't Raccoon City nuked? Isn't it zombies everywhere? What about the zombies in Romania, or whatever? What about the mold zombies, right, from the 8th and the 7th game? What about the zombies in Spain or whatever you want? What about the zombies in in USA in that area? And what about the zombies in that Antarctica on that island? And what about the zombies in Africa? You know what I mean? There's so many zombie outbreaks, right, in the Resident Evil lore. And they even do refer that Wesker is dead, that he died in the Resident Evil, the 5 in the Africa storyline. So it is based on the games, right? And it makes it so extra confusing having played the games and being like, but how did they? Because okay, let's say for argument's sake that they managed to hide what happened with the nuke. Okay, let's say that. Okay, it's kind of weird, but let's argue for that. Okay. But everything, as I mentioned, right, all these other games in the lore are taking place in new cities, right? Because every game is basically a new place, right? I mean, certainly some games, but there are a few games you kind of replay, but you get my point. Like the main games, they have a new place, right? So, for example, in the last game, which is called Lady D, right? We are in some kind of, like Transylvania, Romania, right? East European place. It has vampire zombies, there are mold people, whatever. But that exists, right? You know what I mean? That exists, right? Isn't that the same lore? Isn't it the same universe? So, of course, the problem then arises is like, how are they hidden everything? The nuke, I guess, is the hardest thing to hide, but I mean, certainly there are zombies everywhere in this world. That's kind of how it feels, right? There's zombies there, right? And you're just like, okay, because they clearly have Instagram, they have YouTube, they have social media, they have TikTok, they have Twitter, right? They refer to, Facebook and Google and so on, right? So you really wonder, like, okay, so no one's ever had a smartphone on them. No one's ever managed to, take a photo of a zombie in, I don't know, let's say Eastern Europe or Africa, whatever, yeah, or South Africa, or whatever they are in. It just feels really weird, right? It's just so weird, yeah. You have a very hard time believing the universe you're in, that it's supposed to be the same universe. Well, I guess it is, right? Kinda. So they really should have explained in the beginning that no one believes in zombies for a reason. Like, because when they get into that scene, when they meet the zombie rabbit and the zombie dog and so on, right? These girls are seemingly believing that these are just animals that are sick, right? But if I knew I was in Resident Evil world, I'd be like, zombie rabbit! I would be immediately like, it's a zombie, right? I would never question that it's a zombie. And I'm going to point is that if I grew up in this world, right, it's like 2030 now, and we're living in the Resident Evil universe, I'm pretty sure we would have heard about a lot of zombies by now, you know what I mean? So you would be very afraid of, like, this weird rabbit looks very zombie infected, yeah. Like, that kind of stuff just feels weird, right? And I really, really, really wish they would have explained that in some way. I guess the problem is they can't really explain that, because it's a shitty written lore that they have done here, right? And they're shitting on the original source, and how to kind of combine those two doesn't make much sense. So they're just like acting like, yes, those games happened, but we don't really care about them. They happened, but we don't care about them at the same time. Something like that. And it gets really weird. And then, of course, I mentioned earlier, but it feels really strange, right? How nothing is really there. So again, the Wesker, for example, is a clone of Wesker, right? Wesker has powers, a guy has powers. So in the Wesker fight scene, his eyes never glue up. So it's almost like getting nerdy. Yeah, now we're getting on the gritty nerd stuff, right? But his eyes never shine. That pissed me off, man. That pissed me freaking off, okay? I expected Wesker's eyes to at least shine, right, when he is fighting the goddamn guards, right? Because Wesker's thing, shiny eye thing, that's a classic thing, right? His eyes are brrrp, and then you're like, oh, he's a kind of, he got powers, right? Because, of course, Wesker looks like a human, but he actually has the progenitor virus, so he's actually much stronger and faster, and, he can heal and so on. So he's supposed to be the perfect human, right? Like the the human, him and his sister, right? It's supposed to be the Weskers that have gotten the virus that made them stronger, right? Because the main point of Resident Evil isn't to just make zombies, right? The point was to make this tyrant, T2, Zero, and so on, right? They were gonna fight for the military, right? The point was to make like super soldiers that could fight in the wars and so on, yeah. And also, of course, bioweaponry. But it was mostly to be different kind of super soldiers, right? Kind of like Captain America serum gone wrong, right? But in Wesker's case, it worked. You know what I mean? That's kind of his storyline, right? He's the boy raised by them to be the perfect human, right? So when he's fighting his guards, first of all, it's a bad action scene, right? It's like 2-3 guards. It should have been like 50 people, and that's gonna be it should be cooler. Wesker gonna go around, kick them all ass. It should be Wesker owning them until they got him down. But it should have been a lot more people. That would be cooler. And his eyes should have been red. And he should have jumped, superpowers or whatever. Instead he just pushes them. It's so boring. It's very lame. He's supposed to be a superhuman, yet we never see any powers, right? So that's terrible. And it just feels so lazy. He couldn't even make his eyes shine, He could have beaten up those guards and his eye could have been turned red. And the kids could be, oh, their eyes are red. He's like, well, I'm your uncle, but yes, our eyes turned red and we fight. Like, it could have been it's just something like those kind of, details are lacking, right? It makes it so terrible for a fan of Resident Evil because, yeah, it's kind of like, I don't know, take a random example here, but like I'm playing a bunch of different games, right? So currently I'm playing Tales of Arise, okay? In Tales of Arise, if you have the costume pack, you can have Mia's costume on Xion, because Mia from Code Vein also is a rifle girl. They both have rifles, so you can have like Mia's costume, right? It's also the typical, DLC shit, right? But it's like a reference, same game company, right? Same publisher. Here's our costume, and I said it makes sense because they both have the same fighting style. You know what I mean? It is like it's not the best thing ever. I'm saying, okay, it makes sense, right? Those kind of stuff is pretty, it's pretty cute, right? Yeah. This show lacks all of that, right? There's no real references almost entirely to the actual games, and like the eye thing missing or the powers missing, whatever, is there. And of course, Evelyn is a huge issue because Evelyn is supposed to be the Evelyn, right? From 7 and 8, right? Evelyn is the main bad guy. Spoiled here from 7. Evelyn is the main bad girl, and she's the mold baby, like Miranda's mold baby, whatever, turned into Evelyn. And then Rose is kind of Evelyn and whatever. Like, what is it supposed to be? Like, is it supposed to be Rose grown up or something? Is it supposed to be Evelyn that survived 7 from Ethan and then turned into this, like, CEO or something? Like, what is it supposed to be, right? Because she has the same name, and, like, I think it's so pathetic, honestly, that Evelyn has no powers, right? Like, Evelyn is supposed to be the evil Umbrella CEO, and you would imagine, and that's why this show also feels so boring, right? Because it lacks all those Resident Evil feel to it. Because I would imagine that Evelyn should have had some powers, right? I would imagine that Evelyn should come in there, of course, and be like, when she's attacked by the door, she'd be like, blocked her, right? Like a mental power, yeah, like, she's like, I can't move. It's like, well, you think you're the only special kid, So that, like, I would love to see Wesker, right? Like, getting pissed off, getting the eyes red, flying with that kind of speed, right? So kind of super speed, trying to protect his daughters, right, from Evelyn. In an actual normal fight, right? He's like shooting them. He's like superpower, block the bullet, right? And then of course after that, when he's like blocked the bullet, and he's like, I will kill you, Evelyn. It's time to stand up myself, right? He's like super angry, getting red eyes, getting faster, all that shit, right? And she's like, you can't move. He's like, my body's frozen. It's like, I also got powers, bitch. That is what I expected, right? Kinda. If I haven't seen the show, I would expect that kind of fight, right? Like Evil Wesker or Good Wesker, I guess. Good Wesker, super speed, blah blah blah, and so on, right? Fighting, telepathic, telekinetic Evelyn, right? And Evelyn is like, I can freeze you, I can give you visions, I can give you hallucinations. Yeah, that kind of shit should have happened, right? That would have been Resident Evil, because the evil CEO of Umbrella should probably have some powers, right? Like, she's the daughter of the evil CEO. She should have been an experiment, right? She should have her own clones or whatever. Or she should be the successful power. Her son should have powers too, right? Her son should have powers, yeah. Her wife should have powers, probably. Her son should definitely have been an experiment that succeeded, right? Like, if she shot him, he should be able to survive and be like, actually, I'm a tyrant T7 or whatever, you know what I mean? That would have been so much more Resident Evil, right? So it really lacks that. again, respect, right, of the source material, because if I was writing Resident Evil, right, the movie version, I would have written something like, okay, here's the power, this thing's gonna happen, oh, the son, oh, he's actually the Ouroboros tyrant, Columbine, you know. Like, that shit is so much more interesting, right? And Resident Evil is kind of campy. It's supposed to be over the top, right? Yeah. They should have way more powers, and they should be, that's why it doesn't feel like Resident Evil either, because no one's in the power, and also for that matter, yes, being right, everything is a zombie. Yes, there's a crocodile zombie in the end, or whatever, but you know, generally speaking, right, Resident Evil always has big ass monsters around, flying shit and so on, yeah. It really lacks a lot of the weirdness, right? You expect it to be more crazy monsters and people having 10 eyes or 10 arms, or yeah, like, of course it's very low budget, all the zombies are very basic, and we keep seeing this like tyrant, I guess, in the basement of Umbrella, but it does nothing, right? It's just pointless. And of course, it's in the future, they should have, you know, a bunch of like super tyrants or whatever. They should have like Tyrant TC-1155 or whatever in the basement. Yeah, they should have an army of tyrants. It could be so much more interesting, but it's just shit, right? Yeah, it's just really shitty. And it kind of sets up a nexus, like, for tyrant. But even so, they should have much more of that. It's just so lame, right? It's just so lacking of the actual Resident Evil content, right? And I'm so frustrated. And it's so bad. But for example, the crocodile, I think that's a great example of this thing. The crocodile, right, is released to fight the helicopters. It makes no sense, because it's a goddamn crocodile, okay? It's a goddamn crocodile. So it makes zero sense what a crocodile is gonna fight the helicopters for. I guess the point is to kill them before they fly up. But imagine this thing, right? If I was the writer of this story, what would I have done? I would have made the crocodile shoot AA shit. Is it that hard, Netflix? Jesus Christ, man. It's so easy to write this shit, right? It writes itself. The crocodile should have gone out there, right? And had some weird, you know, sacks on his back, right? And these sacks should have shot down the helicopters. Am I the only one to be like, pew, 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 and the helicopter will explode, and it will be badass, right? You know what I mean? That's Resident Evil, yeah. The crocodile should have had some kind of missile poison thing on his back, right? Yeah. And be able to shoot stuff in the air. That would have been so much cooler, and it would have fit Resident Evil that the crocodile is some kind of mutation, right, between some bioweaponry and this thing, and that's why you can shoot helicopters and airplanes. That would have made so much more sense, because the ship is weakened, you know, the ship needs protecting against, yeah, the ship needs, I guess, from Umbrella, right? It needs to have protection from like submarines and flying stuff, yeah. So the crocodile naturally would be anti-submarine, right? Yeah. So the second thing would be anti-air. And it's just so like, why can't they do this shit? It's just a crocodile. It's just a big crocodile. It's so boring. It's so boring. So in the end, right, the show is just terrible, because even the easiest stuff to do, it fails on, right? Yeah, like, Jesus Christ. Give the crocodile anti-air powers. It's so stupid. They can't give the crocodile that, right? It's just effing terrible writing. It's just so bad. It's like creativity and so on. But seriously, it's really like pathetic, right? Because, yeah, the crocodile should be able to shoot freaking stuff from mid-air. It'd be so much better. I'd be like, whoa, you know, there is a bit actually better. But it would feel Resident Evil if the crocodile runs out there, has poison sacks on his back, and it's like pew pew pew, shoots down the helicopters, right? It would be a better action scene, and it actually would feel like I'm watching Resident Evil, the game, right? But no, it's just a crocodile. This show is so terrible. But anyway, guys, that's a rant over the lore rant there. But I feel that's the more the nerdy stuff, right? It's just so easy to imagine how much better this could have been, right? It's so easy to imagine how much easier this thing is to write and actually make it more entertaining, right? But instead, it's just utter garbage. It's just truly utter garbage. And I just feel like I'm surprised this shit keeps getting greenlit, right? Now they have that Yu Yu Yakuza is also getting, oh, that's gonna be great. But it's probably made in Japan or something, I guess, made it better. But, because I mean, at least Bastard is actually really good. But Bastard, right, is an anime and is made by just a Japanese studio, right? You know what I mean? It's kind of censored on Netflix, but it's like made by only, you know, a Japanese studio with, I feel like, no Western input. And they're like, we're just doing a big ass, big boobs, and big swords, and it just works, yeah. It's not like, you know, yeah, but I think the main thing, Bastard, the adaptation, is very true to its source, right? yes, it's censored, but it's following the source, by the book, right? So it respects the source material, and that's probably why it works better. Where this is like, how can we buy the Netflix? How can we buy like the PR, I don't know, the title of Resident Evil, and then just make something? Yeah, like it's like they don't care for a second, right, to make it be Resident Evil. It's just so terrible. But anyway, guys, please subscribe, press that like button, right? Do you want me to make another Cool Beep review something? If this video gets 100 likes, I guess I'll finally do that. But people asked me last year, to make the Cool Bebop review, but I was just like, I don't want to. I was like, I hate it so much, I don't want to. I was like, I don't want to. It's so bad. Well, yeah. Maybe I have to one day. I don't know. Anyway, so you guys have a great day.